guys, it's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS fades and sleepers for this week's RBC Heritage. In this video, we'll be covering the most overhyped and overlooked players of the week, the guys coming in with far too much ownership that I expect to go out and bust as chalk, our fades, and of course our sleeper picks, those diamonds in the rough that are being overlooked, relatively low owned leverage plays that can go out there and get you all the money in these large field tournaments. The goal here, of course, is to try and leverage the plays that I expect to come through for us and again avoid some of that chalk that could go out there and bust. This is by far the most important video of the week because we are not only considering a player's projection here, but also of course a lot of the game theory that goes into these DFS contests. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop right on into it. Alright guys, on the screen you can see our projections, and the big update of course is the projected ownership tab. Now we have ownership that we're closer to lock now. It should be a little bit more accurate, and we're going to go ahead and start off with our fades, which up top, the first fade I'm going with is going to be Cameron Smith. And if you've been here for a while, you know I absolutely love the golfer, so it's nothing against him personally. It's just that Sunday meltdown at the Masters doesn't have me feeling the right way about his momentum, and in general, there's a few things about his game specifically that I'm worried about this week. So let's go ahead and start off with the performance at the Masters, which on Saturday and Sunday, he really started to falter down the stretch. His driving accuracy really got hairy. He started missing left in almost every single tee shot, which of course, it's almost impossible to play well at Augusta National if you're not playing out of the short stuff, especially considering how big those fairways are. Really hard to miss those fairways. So for him to be shanking it, duck hooking it left into the woods every single shot shows you how bad the swing really was. And of course, going to a golf course here at the RBC Heritage, Harbour Golf Links, that has some tree-lined fairways and even denser woods than what you have at Augusta National, that doesn't bode all that well. Now, if we were going to a wide open golf course where there wasn't many trees, where driving accuracy wasn't a huge factor, I'd be all over him, right? Great approach play of late, particularly over the last 24 measured rounds. He's been unbelievable in that category. Pretty much in the top 5 in the field, right? Only trailing Justin Thomas by right around a tenth of a stroke per round. The putter, of course, always going to be the magic broomstick for Cameron Smith, but you can see the ugly part of his game, the shots gained off the tee, rearing its ugly head, and you especially saw that at Augusta National. Now, with this course specifically, right, if you've already seen my course breakdown, any other information on Harbour Town this week, I'm sure you guys have at this point, right? We're getting towards Tuesday and Wednesday with this analysis. You know that driving accuracy matters, and a whole lot. Now, guys like Cameron Smith aren't going to have to hit driver on every single hole. He should be able to hit 3-wood, potentially driving irons. He's also not that accurate with those. We've seen that over the years. This is somebody who on par 5s, he gets it done with the wedge play. He doesn't really get on the 2 on many of these par 5s, is usually hitting that 50 to 60 yard wedge shot to take advantage. And at this golf course specifically, you're not going to have many wedges in hand. In fact, this is one of the golf courses where you hit the least amount of shots from that 50 to 100 yard range. So one of his strong suits isn't going to be available. Of course, I'm worried about the driving accuracy that we saw there at the Masters. And he's also coming in with 16.2% projected ownership. So it's not like he's being completely overlooked. He's still up there with guys like a JT. He's higher owned than somebody like a Cantlay or a Shane Lowry, we'll talk about here in a second, who I absolutely love for this week. And in general, there's just better courses for him, right? When you have a little bit less penalty for missing fairways, that's definitely the courses that I'm trying to target somebody like a Cam Smith. And usually when he's a little bit less owned, right? He's a little bit expensive right now because of some of the performances like he had at the Players Championship, which is great and all, but realistically, in about a month, he should be closer to $9,000, maybe even $9,500 in these type of fields. Also coming in with, let's say, 10 to 15% ownership rather than that 15 to 20% range. So just somebody I'm not thrilled about playing this week. There's just better pivot options, particularly even a little bit cheaper down the board. The next fade I want to talk about here is going to be Tommy Fleetwood at $8,200, who inexplicably is getting a ton of steam this weekend. Perhaps I get it, right? He's looked a little bit better of late than what he did over the last year and a half, but he's still yet to do anything special, right? He hasn't posted that top 5 finish that we're looking for. And even though the shots gained metrics do look a little bit better, like I said, he still hasn't been posting anything flashy. So just to give you an idea of why people are going and running to the window to play Tommy Fleetwood, he's gaining off the tee, which isn't always a consistent part of his game, so that's good to see. The approach play is still negative, which is a huge issue, but he's getting carried by the short game. Around the green and putting, he's gaining close to a stroke per round, which, if we take a look at the last 50 measured rounds, a little bit of a larger sample size, you can see that's a constant, right? He's always going to be really good around the green, always going to be gaining quite a bit with the putter. The unfortunate part is that the approach play is never going to be there, and at this golf course specifically, that is by far the most important part of your game. I mean, off the tee, it's almost non-existent. Most of these guys are going to be be hitting layups or hitting driving irons off the tee for the most part. So even though he's gaining off the tee, I don't want to give him all that much credit for that. It's mostly due to distance, not necessarily his accuracy. And that makes this a second shot golf course, which he's a loser to the field in that category. So at $8,200, you'd really be hoping he's a more solid play, which I get it, right? The around the green play and the putting has been solid, but if we're depending on somebody to be carried by their short game, especially somebody up top that's over $8,000, somebody coming in at 14.2% ownership, that just doesn't sound like a recipe for success, right? It sounds like a recipe for you to go out there and be disappointed this week. Oh, wow, he didn't chip in 3 times this week. Oh, wow, he wasn't making every 20, 30-foot putt. I mean, that just sounds like a way to go out there and be tilted this week. So for me, I'm not going to be a part of that experience. He has that high upside, but at the same time, he also has an extremely low floor. Could very well go out there and miss the cut this week. If we take a look at his track record around the RBC Heritage, you can see he missed the cut here last time out, also finished just 25th here in 2019. So not necessarily the ideal track record that we'd be looking for. And I guess something I meant to mention up here with Cam Smith as well is he also has a relatively rough track record. 9th place in 2021, which is great to see, but missed cut in 2020 and 2019, and then just a 32nd and a 29th the years prior to that. So these aren't guys that have been absolutely killing it at the RBC Heritage. And of course, like I've already voiced, a couple issues with their shots gained metrics as well. All right, and now for the final fade. That is going to be Adam Hadwin at $7,600, who's one of the highest owned players in the 7K range that we've seen for quite some time. He's projected to be owned in 20.5% of lineups, which for somebody like Adam Hadwin is just illogical. I know the recent form has been there. Let's go ahead and touch on why everyone wants to roster him this week. It's because of the recent performances. So first and foremost, a top 5 at the Valero, which for him at that type of a venue was a little bit surprising for sure. So definitely understand the sentiment behind him there. But 7th at the Valspar, 9th at the Players Championship. So 3 straight top 10s. The unfortunate part is that we know Adam Hadwin's game. We know that this is a player who isn't that high upside, where he's more consistent than anything. We're used to seeing him finish in the top 25. He'll win every once in a while, but this isn't a world beater. This isn't somebody who's going to finish in the top 10 every single week. And for him to be the highest owned player in this range and it not even be particularly close makes him a fade. I'd much rather invest in players like a Kevin Streelman, who's also coming in on a pretty hot stretch of form. Of course, a few of our other core picks like a Kevin Na, Maverick McNeely, Jason Kokrak, who are only a little bit more expensive and arguably have a lot higher upside. So let's go ahead and take a look first off at the shots gained metrics for somebody like an Adam Hadwin, where it looks great, right? Of course, the approach play has been solid for quite some time. He's always going to be a really good approach player. Off the tee, he tends to be relatively accurate, so he checks that box for us this week. The unfortunate part is he's not the most consistent putter, and he can definitely bleed strokes on the greens from time to time. And of course, on POA, he is a solid putter, so it does check that box there. But with that inconsistency, it's not infeasible for him to go out there and miss the cut this week. You've seen that happen at this golf course specifically. So if we take a look at the course history, you'll see what I'm talking about. A missed cut here last year, a 41st in 2020, a 48th in 2019, a 22nd in 2017. And I know the first argument will be he hasn't been in this type of form going into this event, right? But at the same time, we know he's been around forever. This guy's been on tour for 6-7 years at this point. We know the type of game that he has, and we know he's not a world beater. So, it's nothing against Adam Hadwin. I think he's a very above average player, right? Somebody who's going to make the playoffs more often than not on the PGA Tour. But for him to be 20.5% owned is just way, way, way too high. I mean, if he was 12, 13%, then I'd be willing to get that 25, maybe 30% exposure rate to him. But for me to have to put him in 45% of my lineups this week to be able to get adequate leverage on him, it's just something I'm not even thinking about doing, right? It was a pretty much immediate fade when I saw that ownership number right there. So hopefully he doesn't go out there and end up finishing in the top 10 for the 4th straight week. But of course, the odds are that that is not going to happen. So I feel pretty good about that fade right there, which is pretty much only ownership based right there. Because of course, if he was 7-8%, he'd be one of our favorite plays of the week. But unfortunately with DFS, there's a lot more that goes into it than just pure projections. So the smart play on the play that I'm going with is going to be a fade. Let's talk about our sleeper picks now, where we're going to go back up to the top of the board. And there's a few guys as sleepers I didn't expect to be sleepers. First off, we have Patrick Cantlay, who's a Pete Dye specialist. Pretty much every time we get to one of his tracks, he gets talked up from a shots gained perspective. Because if you take a look at the last 3 years on Pete Dye tracks, he's routinely in the top 5 in terms of shots gained total, which makes sense. He's a strategic player, very solid off the tee, very solid with the approach play. Good around the green, pretty much gains in every stat category, which for Pete Dye designs is the name of the game. You have to be well-rounded. The guys that end up winning the Players' Championship, of course, TPC Sawgrass, one of Pete Dye's signature designs on tour, are the guys that gain in all 4 categories. So not a surprise that he's had success at these venues. In terms of this venue specifically, a little bit different than most of them, a little bit less strategic, a little bit less difficult than some of his other tracks on tour, but you still have to be accurate off the tee, still have to be extremely precise into these greens. 2 things that Patrick Cantlay can certainly get done. So I think he's being a little bit overlooked here. If we take a look at the shots gained metrics, he was a fade for us last week because he was much higher owned than he will be this week, and that was because of the approach play. Fortunately, at the Masters, we don't have shots gained metrics, but from the eye test, he looked a lot sharper. He was hitting those shots to 8 to 10 feet. He actually was a little bit less sharp with the putter than what we've seen over the last few months, which was a little bit surprising for Cantlay. You can see he's a slight loser for the last 24 measured rounds, and that's really what I think is holding him back. The approach play looked good enough at the Masters. You know, it wasn't top 5 in the field or anything like that. That's why he didn't end up finishing in the top 10, but it was the putter that was standing out to me. But if we take a zoom out on Patrick Cantlay, right, give him a big enough sample size, there is no hotter putter on tour. I mean, at the end of the 2021 season, when he went on that run towards the playoffs, he was making literally everything. If a longer term sample size, you can see he's still a gainer with the putter, closer to a quarter of a stroke per round. And the longer and longer that you let that sample size go out, the more and more that he starts to gain to the field. So I'm expecting him to return to that type of identity at some point. The ball striking has still been there over that stretch of golf. And if he can return to making a ton of putts on these surfaces, he's very live to go out there and actually win this event. So at 14.4% ownership, I expect that to be much lower than it should be. I would have him closer to 25-30% owned if I was just allowing my ownership to dictate the field. So I'm going to have that 30-35% exposure rate in my player pool to go ahead and take advantage of that. Next up, we have Shane Lowry at $9,800. He's another sleeper that I like this weekend. Frankly, I didn't expect him to be a sleeper pick. I thought he would get plenty of ownership this week because a lot of people have been talking him up. I mean, of course, the finishes, the Masters, he was in the top 5 at one point, a few other top 20 finishes over his last 2 or 3 starts, and in general, has just been improving and improving over time with his approach play. So if we take a look at the shots gained metrics, get an idea of exactly what he's been doing well, gaining over half a stroke on approach, gaining over half a stroke off the tee. He's gaining nearly 2/3 of a stroke per round with the putter. So from a shots gained perspective, Shane Lowry is playing some of the best golf in the world, and that's why he's there at number 3 in recent form rank. It's also why he's number 3 in total model rank for this golf course. And from a course fit perspective, just from his skill set, he's a good fit here, right? He's relatively inaccurate off the tee, but because he has some distance, we'll be able to lay up a little bit. He should be able to make up for that by hitting iron or 3-wood off the tee. And with his around the green play, the putting we've seen of late, and the approach play where he's gaining over a half a stroke per round, he has all 3 tools that we're looking for. So really somebody I don't have any question marks about, and I expected him to be chalk. Like, I thought he was going to be 20, maybe even 25% owned this week, and I guess the price tag here at $9,800 is keeping people a little bit more hesitant about him, which for me makes him an excellent play on the board, and one of the guys that I'm going to be getting a ton of leverage to, potentially even 35-40% ownership to, right? I'd be much more willing to take 40% of a Shane Lowry than I would of somebody like an Adam Hadwin. That's for sure. You just feel a lot better about doing that type of thing. And now lastly, the last sleeper I want to talk about is Chris Kirk, and he was super chalk a few weeks ago, ended up making the cut, and I know he didn't finish in the top 25, which boded well for our fade. But how's this guy 7% owned now? I have him at 7.9%. He didn't miss the cut. He's been in pretty solid form of late. He's a perfect skill set fit for this golf course. How is he 3 times less owned than he was a few weeks ago? It makes no sense to me. Nothing has changed about Chris Kirk. So we take a look at these shots gained metrics. I mean, the guy's been on an absolute tear, gaining nearly half a stroke per round off the tee and on approach, nearly half a stroke per round around the green. And the putter has been a little bit inconsistent, but even with the inconsistency, he's still been making pretty much every single cut. He's still been going out there and finishing top 25 in almost every single event. So to show you the recent form that I'm talking about here, first off, you can see 35th at the Valero, right? That's the week that we faded him where he didn't necessarily come through. The Players' Championship, he was on the bad side of the draw. A lot of people are, of course, looking past that and aren't going to hold that against him. But 5th place at the API. During the whole Florida swing, during Honda Classic, he was top 5. A few other top 25s before that. Nothing's changed from the last time that we saw Chris Kirk, and now he's only 7.9% owned. Just ridiculous to me. He's got the accuracy off the tee we're looking for. The approach play has been there. He's a well-rounded player, still gains around the green, and on these surfaces specifically, you can see he's a loser for his career, but in general, he's not the best putter to begin with. Now, when he was on that hot stretch of golf in Florida, he was gaining a ton of strokes with the putter, and that's why he was posting those top 5, top 10 finishes for the first time in a while, but those were on a POA Trivalous overseed. The same situation we're going to have this week, and even though his historical numbers on POA aren't all that good, he's getting that same exact type of situation up here at Hilton Head. So I really like where things are trending. I think he's being overlooked, and that certainly shouldn't be the case for this week, because from a recent form, from a course fit perspective, he is one of my favorite plays on the board. So certainly somebody I'll be getting plenty of leverage to in my lineups this week. All right, guys, that's all I've got here for the fades and sleepers. Before you go on and get out of here, go ahead and let me know down in the comments, first off, who your biggest fade is this week, and of course, your biggest sleeper pick. Would love to hear from you guys down below, whether you agree with me or completely disagree. Always love to hear your guys' opinions, so make sure you go ahead and do that. Also, we're going to have a DFS live stream that'll be Wednesday night tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern time, so make sure to look forward to that. We'll be covering the weather, my player poll, any changes in ownership, some strategy, any of your live questions, pretty much everything you're going to need to know for DFS this week. So a link will be down in the description for that. So make sure to go ahead and click a reminder there. Make sure you don't miss that tomorrow at 7. Also, make sure you like the video if you haven't. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already as well. That way you don't miss that live stream, any of the other DFS content that I'll be coming out with throughout the weeks. I appreciate all of your support here, guys. Best of luck for all of your DFS lineups this week, and let's get this cash.